Dear students, today we will understand the calculation of the magnitude of a vector, determining unit vector of a vector, addition of two vectors, subtraction of two vectors, and multiplication of two vectors. Look at here. These are the three examples of vectors. This is p vector and these are the elements of this p vector. This is q vector and these are the elements of this q vector, and this is a vector and these are the elements of this a vector. These are the coefficients of the I vectors. These are the coefficients of the j vectors and these are the coefficients of the k vectors. Now we will determine the magnitude of these vectors. Look at this tricky common formula to determine the magnitude of a vector. Modulus of the vector whose magnitude we want to determine equals square root coefficient square of I cap plus coefficient square of j cap plus coefficient square of k cap. Suppose we want to determine the magnitude of this p vector. Look at here. Modulus of the vector whose magnitude we want to determine. So we will write here this p vector as we want to determine its magnitude. Look at here. Coefficient square of I cap. The coefficient of I cap is positive 2 here. So we will write here 2 square plus, look at here, coefficient square of j cap. The coefficient of j cap is positive 3 here. So we will write here 3 square plus, look at here, coefficient square of k cap. The coefficient of k cap is negative 1 here. So we will write here negative 1 whole square. So we can write square root 4 instead of this 2 square plus 9 instead of this 3 square plus 1 instead of this negative 1 whole square. Therefore, modulus of p vector equals square root 14. This is the magnitude of this p vector. Let's find out the magnitude of this q vector. Q vector equals 3i cap minus 2j cap plus 6k cap. Therefore, the magnitude of q vector is modulus of q vector equals square root this 3 square plus this negative 2 square plus this 6 square equals square root 9 instead of this 3 square plus 4 instead of this negative 2 whole square plus 36 instead of this 6 square equals square root 49, that is 7. This is the magnitude of this q vector. Now let us determine the magnitude of this a vector. A vector equals 2j cap minus 5k cap. Therefore, the magnitude of a vector is modulus of a vector equals square root this 2 square plus this negative 5 square equals square root 4 instead of this 2 square plus 25 instead of this negative 5 whole square equals square root 29. This is the magnitude of this a vector. Let us determine unit vector of a vector. To determine unit vector from a given vector, we divide the vector by its magnitude. Suppose we want to determine the unit vector of this q vector. Therefore, we will divide this q vector by its magnitude like this. Q vector over its magnitude. After finishing calculation of it, we will get the unit vector of this q vector. So we can write q vector over its magnitude equals this 3I cap minus 2j cap plus 6k cap over square root this 3 square plus this negative 2 square plus this 6 square. Just a little while ago we have learnt this rule. Equals this 3I cap minus 2j cap plus 6k cap over square root 9 plus 4 plus 36 equals this 3I cap minus 2j cap plus 6k cap over square root 49 equals this 3I cap minus 2j cap plus 6k cap over 7. This is the unit vector of q vector. We can rearrange this unit vector like this: 3 over 7 I cap minus 2 over 7 j cap plus 6 over 7 k cap. Try to determine the unit vector of this p vector and the unit vector of this a vector yourselves. I am sure that you have already achieved this ability. Our next topic is the addition of two vectors. Actually, it is very simple. Suppose we want to add this p vector with this q vector to obtain their sum. Then we will write this p vector plus this q vector equals 2I cap plus 3j cap minus k cap for this p vector plus 3I cap minus 2j cap plus 6k cap for this q vector. We all know that 3x plus 5x equals 8x, don't we? Similarly, we can write this 2I cap plus this 3I cap equals 5I cap. In this way, we can write p vector plus q vector equals 2I cap plus 3I cap, that is 5I cap here, 3j cap minus 2j cap, that is positive j cap here, 6k cap minus k cap, that is positive 5k cap here. This is the sum of the addition of two vectors. Let us determine the subtraction of two vectors. Suppose we want to subtract this q vector from this p vector. Then we will write this p vector minus this q vector equals this 2I cap plus 3j cap minus k cap for this p vector minus times this 3I cap minus 2j cap plus 6k cap for this q vector equals 2I cap plus 3j cap minus k cap minus 3I cap plus 2j cap minus 6k cap. From these two we can write negative I cap. From these two we can write positive 5j cap, and from these two we can write negative 7k cap. This is the result of subtraction of these two vectors. Our next topic is multiplication of two vectors. We can multiply two vectors in two ways. One is scalar multiplication and the other is vector multiplication. The another name of scalar multiplication is dot multiplication. By using dot multiplication, we get dot products. The another name of vector multiplication is cross multiplication. By using cross multiplication, we get cross product. If we want to multiply this p vector and this q vector, then for dot product we write p vector dot q vector. And for cross product we write p vector cross q vector. If we get a dot sign between two vectors in a stimulus, then we have to consider it as a dot or a scalar multiplication. On the other hand, if we get a cross sign between two vectors in a stimulus, then we have to consider it as a cross or vector multiplication. Multiplication process for dot product and for cross product will be different. At first, we will learn dot multiplication of two vectors and then we will learn cross multiplication of two vectors. Suppose we want to determine dot multiplication of this p vector and q vector. So, what we have to do is that we will write p vector dot q vector equals 2i cap plus 3j cap minus k cap instead of this p vector dot 3i cap minus 2j cap plus 6k cap instead of this q vector. For getting the dot product, we will have to use the coefficients of I cap, j cap and k cap only. We will multiply the coefficient of one I cap only with the coefficient of another I cap. The coefficient of one j cap only with the coefficient of another j cap and the coefficient of one k cap only with the coefficient of another k cap. That's it. So we will write p vector dot q vector equals these 2 times these 3, that is 6, this plus sign times this minus sign, that is minus, this 3 times this 2, that is 6, this minus times this plus sign, that is minus, this 1 times this 6, that is 6, equals minus 6. This negative 6 is the dot product of the dot multiplication of this p vector and q vector. Do remember, if we would get here 0 instead of negative 6, then we could say that these two vectors are perpendicular with each other. That means if the dot products of two vectors equals 0, then they will be mutually perpendicular. You may get this type of question in the exam. Now I am going to tell you why I didn't consider these I cap, j cap and k cap for dot multiplication. For dot multiplication we get I cap dot I cap equals 1, j cap dot j cap equals 1 and k cap dot k cap equals 1. We know that multiplying any number by 1 is equals that number only. For this reason, we need not to take this I cap, this j cap or this k cap for dot multiplication. Do you understand? Now we will learn cross multiplication of two vectors. In order to determine cross product of two vectors, we use determinant method. This method can be used when the vectors are available in forms of I cap, j cap and k cap. Look at the symbolic representation of determinant method. Here we will write first vector and here we will write second vector. Then we will give here an equal sign. After then we will draw these two birds like this. Between the two birds, this is the first row. In this row, we will write I cap, j cap and k cap like this. This is the second row. In this row, we will take the coefficients of I cap, j cap and k cap of this first vector and write the coefficient of I cap here below this I cap, the coefficient of j cap here below this j cap and the coefficient of k cap here below this k cap. This is third row. In this row we have to do the same thing for this second vector. That means we will write the coefficient of I cap of the second vector here, the coefficient of j cap of the second vector here and the coefficient of k cap of the second vector here. At the time of calculation, we will get two angles here like this. This angle is called the main angle and this angle is called the secondary angle. For this angle, we will get the main angle product and for this angle, we will get the secondary angle product. Then in this format, we will write the value of main angle product and the secondary angle product for this I cap, this j cap and this k cap. Thus, we will get the cross product for the cross multiplication of two vectors. Now, let us understand it with an example. Suppose you want to know the cross product of these two vectors. P vector equals 2i cap plus 3j cap minus k cap. Q vector equals 3i cap minus 2j cap plus 6k cap. What you have to do is that write here this P vector and here this Q vector. Then give here an equal sign and draw these two birds like this. Then in this first row, write I cap, j cap and k cap like this. See, these are the coefficients of I cap, j cap and k cap for this first vector P. In this second row, you have to write these coefficients. Therefore, write these two, the coefficient of I cap here below this I cap. These three, the coefficient of j cap here below this j cap, and this negative 1 k cap, that is negative 1, the coefficient of k cap here below this k cap. Do the same in this third row for this q vector. Write these three here below this I cap, this negative 2 here below this j cap and this 6 here below this k cap. Now you will have to start calculation for this I cap first. Focusing on the I cap, cover its column and row like this with your hand. These are the remaining numbers here. See, this is main angle and this is secondary angle. Now multiply these two numbers. You will get 18. This 18 is called main angle product for this I cap. So write this 18 here instead of this main angle product. Now multiply these negative two numbers. You will get 2. This 2 is called secondary angle product for this I cap. So write these 2 here instead of this secondary angle product. We will have to do the same thing for this j cap and for this k cap. So start calculation for this j cap now. Focusing on the j cap, cover its column and row. These are the remaining numbers here. Multiply these two numbers. You will get 12. This 12 is called main angle product for this j cap. So write this 12 here instead of this main angle product. Now multiply these 3 and this negative 1. You will get negative 3. This negative 3 is called secondary angle product for this j cap. So write this negative 3 here instead of this secondary angle product. This negative sign will turn into positive sign because this negative sign times this negative sign equals positive sign. So give here positive sign instead of this negative sign like this. Now start calculation for this k cap. Focusing on the k cap, cover its column and row. These are the remaining numbers here. Multiply these two with these negative 2. You will get negative 4. This negative 4 is called main angle product for this k cap. So write this -4 here instead of this main angle product. Now multiply these 3 with these 3. You will get 9. Write this 9 here instead of this secondary angle product. If you do just simple addition and subtraction here, you will get I cap 16 minus j cap 15 minus k cap 13. You can rearrange it like this: 16 I cap minus 15 j cap minus 13 k cap. That means P vector cross Q vector equals 16 I cap minus 15 j cap minus 13 k cap. This is the cross product of the cross multiplication of these two vectors. Do remember, after doing cross multiplication of any two vectors, if you get 0, that means if you get the cross product of those two vectors equals 0, then those two vectors will be paralleled. You may get this type of question in the examination also. That's all for today. Thank you very much for watching this tutorial.